who represents Genesee and Orleans counties, or parts of them. We've got Assemblyman Joe Gilligan from the Cattaraugus County area, and he goes all the way south along to Steuben County. Assemblyman Ray Walters joining us shortly. He's on his way from another meeting representing Amherst, and then Assemblyman Dave DiPietro, who represents Southern Erie County and Wyoming. So I think I got all that right. But we're also joined tonight by two very special guests. These are two colleagues of ours who came all the way in from Long Island just to be at this forum this evening. We have Assembly Member Ed Ra, who is the ranking Republican member on the Education Committee, as well as Al Graff, also from Long Island and also on the Education Committee. And I'm going to ask each of the guys to say a few words before we start having people come up to speak. But I just want to give a special thank you to Ed and Al for coming all the way from Long Island. You know, when I go to Albany, it's a 4-hour drive from my house to the Capitol. These guys have another 4 hours beyond that. So they did come a long, long way. And I think that just goes to show how important this issue is to all of us in the Minority Conference and the Assembly. So to both of you, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Well, let me begin by just saying that we all care about children's education. That's why you're all here tonight. That's why we're all here tonight. That's why in New York State, we spend more on education per child than any other state in the nation. It's the second largest expenditure in the governor's proposed budget, in the legislature's proposed budget, and in every enacted budget that we've put forth. It's the second largest only to healthcare. So obviously this is something that's very, very important for all of us. And I bring this point up because I think it's very, very important that we focus on our objective tonight for this forum. And that is to discuss the implementation and effectiveness of the Common Core standards. And most importantly, how it impacts our students, our children. Like I said, I am a parent of a child. He's actually 16, almost 16, so I almost can't call him a child anymore. But I've had him come home already this school year and talk about the testing. And I know firsthand how challenging it is for him and for me watching him go through it. So certainly this is something that matters very much to me personally, but it's also something that matters very, very much to the people who live in this Assembly District. And I wanted to hold this forum tonight here in Akron because I had the opportunity to come out here last spring and meet with some board members and teachers and parents. And we had such a great conversation about the concerns they had, not just about Common Core, but about a lot of budget issues and a lot of things. And it was a great positive discussion. We covered a lot of ground. We had a lot of great ideas. And that's why I wanted to come back to Akron, because I thought this is a great forum, a great opportunity to start talking about some of these other issues. So I want to thank the people in Akron, particularly the school superintendent, Kevin Shanley, and everyone here connected with the school district. You guys are doing a great job on behalf of the people here in this community, and I thank you very much for that. But clearly, tonight's discussion is very, very important, and I promise you, everything that's said tonight will get back to Albany, and so your voices will be heard there. But certainly, we know that our children's future depends on the kinds of decisions we make tonight and in the coming months, and Common Core, it will continue to be a big discussion, I'm sure. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to our colleague, our friend, Assemblyman Ed Ra, again from Long Island, our ranking member on the Education Committee. Ed?
Thank you very much, Jane. Number one, I want to thank Jane certainly and all of the Western New York members, as well as the regional office staff and Jane's staff for their work in putting this together. This is the sixth forum that myself and my colleague Al Graff, as members of the Education Committee, have participated in. We have about 6 more still scheduled. We'll be in Rochester tomorrow night. We've already conducted a few down on Long Island, and we've been working our way up the state. We were in Syracuse last night. And if there's been one common thread through all of those hearings, it's been a lot of just concern amongst parents, amongst teachers, amongst administrators, as to the state of education reform in New York. And it is our belief, certainly on our side of the aisle in the Assembly, that there's no better way to hear feedback on what's going on and try to advocate for policy changes, both legislatively and through the State Department of Education, than from hearing from the people who are dealing with it firsthand, be they people that work in the schools, be they educators, or be they parents who are dealing with, the concerns of their students, their children, as they come home each day, whether it's preparing for a test, whether it's doing homework and getting used to doing so in a whole new way in a lot of these areas. And I just hope that tonight's forum, which I know will be as productive for us as the past 5 have been, I hope it's as productive for all of you as well, that you leave here feeling like your voices are being heard, and that you also leave here realizing that tonight should be part of a continuing conversation, not feeling like you've said your piece and that's it, because I think we have a long way to go in making sure the voices of parents, teachers, administrators are being heard on this issue, so that we make sure anything we're doing within our schools gives due deference, especially to the teachers and the students, so that their classroom experience is the best it possibly can be here in New York State. So with that, I will pass it back to Jane so that my colleagues can make their opening remarks, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next, I'd like to introduce Al Graff. He's a Assembly member from Long Island as well, a member of the Education Committee, and a long-distance driver.
Hi, thank you for letting us come here, and thanks for coming out tonight. This has been, in the beginning back in June, we looked to get a conversation going about where education was going in New York. And I put in a bill to actually withdraw from Common Core and Race to the Top. And the one thing I can say is, one of my biggest advocates, I think, is the Commission of Education. Because every time he goes out there and speaks, more people become aware of what's going on. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight. And the one thing I can say, it's amazing. They have united people throughout the state. There are mothers talking to each other and becoming friends from all corners of the state. They're all communicating with each other. And this is in large part been due to mothers out there that are looking at what's going on with their children and what's going on in their schools. And their voices are being heard. And the idea of this forum is to give you an opportunity to speak to us, to let your voice be heard. We're not looking to cut people off. We're not looking to guide the conversation, right? We're coming out to you and saying, talk to us. Let us hear what's going on in your home. Let us hear what's going on in your schools. Let us hear how this is affecting you, if it's positive or it's negative. Like Ed said, we've been quite a bit all over the state, and whether it's Staten Island, whether it's Long Island, whether it's Central New York or out here, we're hearing a lot of the same stories. And trust me, we're listening. So again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.
Next, I'd like to introduce Assemblyman Joe Giglio.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. As my colleagues have said, we're here to listen, hopefully make a bad bill or a bad program better. And it's going to be your ideas and your input that make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is David DiPietro. I'm from Southern Erie and all of Wyoming County. And again, I would like to thank Al and Ed for coming out, taking their time. They do great work up in Albany for you. And just reiterating that we are here to listen. We know there are problems and we want to find a way to solve it so when we go back into Albany in January, we can tackle this problem.
Thanks, Dave. And let's see, who am I missing here? Assemblymember Steve Hawley and then Ray Walter.
It's great to be here this evening. I'm not sure, are these working? Test 2, 3. No, they're not. They do look good though, don't they? The microphones. We're all here today because we share a common goal, providing a world-class education for our children. The Common Core is a major educational reform with the intent of helping us reach that goal. But as with any substantial change, many problems and concerns have been raised since its implementation. The purpose of this meeting is to bring all of the affected groups together, parents, and teachers, and administrators, and students, so we can identify the successes and failures of the program and how we can reach our goal of improving education in all of New York. As an 8-year member of the Genesee Valley BOCES Board of Education, I have seen firsthand how illuminating this kind of event can be. More voices at the table help deliver more perspective and insight in our effort to get this right for our kids. In August, I organized a meeting with Deshaun Wright, the Deputy Secretary for State Education, and more than 20 local superintendents and Board of Education members. This was a very productive conversation that touched on many important subjects, but it seemed like we always kept coming back to the topic of Common Core. This is an issue on the mind of every parent and educator who work tirelessly to make sure that the children in their care are receiving the best chance for future success. Education has been a personal priority of mine since becoming an elected official. Having been named the 2008 Assembly Freshman of the Year by the New York State School Board Association, I have a long-standing relationship with the stakeholders here today, and I have complete faith in our ability to straighten out the problems we've seen in implementing Common Core. At the conclusion of tonight's event, I'm hopeful that we will all feel as though we've learned something about the challenges our teachers are facing in teaching this new curriculum. Something about the problems our parents are having in dealing with an unaccountable education bureaucracy. Something about the pressure our children are under facing these new tests. The bottom line is that when we can bring this large crowd together, sharing the common goal to help New York's students, only good can come out of our efforts. I look forward to a productive and illuminating discussion tonight. And now, Ray Walter.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jane, for hosting us here in your district in Akron. I used to represent Akron and Newstead when I was in the county legislature, so it's good to be home. But now I represent Amherst, so I have the Williamsville School District, Amherst School District, Sweet Home School District, and I also represent Pendleton and Niagara County, so I have the Star Point School District. So I'm glad to see some familiar faces here that we'll be hearing from in a little while. This issue really hit home with me earlier in the year. We did a mailing asking people to express their opinions about some of the testing that's been going on in school. And the responses that we received were overwhelmingly negative, and really raised a red flag to me about what's going on with our educational system. The second thing was I participated in a forum with the Partnership for Smarter Schools at Kleinhans Music Hall earlier in the year, about a month and a half. And 2,500 people very concerned about the direction of our educational system. And I think it's extremely important that, unlike the Education Commissioner, that we're here to listen to you. So thank you very much for being here, for participating, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. The first person to get up and speak is Mike Cornell. I believe he is the principal of Amherst Middle School and also heads up the Partnership for Smarter Schools. And I am looking for Mike. Where is he? Come on up. Mike, if you don't mind just stepping up to the podium, I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the members of the Assembly Minority Conference for hosting the forum, especially those who have come from great distance to join us here in Western New York. Welcome to you. We appreciate the fact that you find this issue important enough to travel the state to seek input from educators and parents on the impact of the current reform agenda. Thank you for the invitation to share my experiences and understandings with respect to the current reform initiative. I am the principal of Amherst Middle School, as Jane said. Please note the comments are my own and should not be considered the policy of the Amherst Central School District. Just have to put that disclaimer out there. They haven't yet taken a position, and it's not for me to do for them. So, altogether, I spent 20 years as a middle school principal, a high school social studies teacher, and I oversaw a district-wide staff development program and served as a department chair. These multiple perspectives on the current reforms caused me to join stakeholders from all over Western New York to join the Partnership for Smarter Schools. It is on their behalf that I offer my remarks tonight. This kind of advocacy that suggests alternatives to the current policies of the New York State Education Department is frankly a little bit uncomfortable. For the better part of my 20 years, I worked with my colleagues actively to support the State Education Department to implement various standards, movements, and changes in student assessment. I'd much prefer to carry out my work as a principal, confident in the research around the reforms offered by policymakers and feeling really positive about the fact that they'll have a positive effect on my students. Unfortunately, like many teachers and administrators, I find myself following the directives, working furiously to mitigate their negative impacts by day, and advocating for change by night. My advocacy, which includes helping form the partnership, is fueled by my intense desire to help every child learn. But I do that mindful of the fact that the policymakers want the same thing. So while we share a desire to help every child learn, I think we have very different ideas about how to accomplish that and how we should measure it. My advocacy has led me to deep understandings of the reform agenda, its genesis, and its basis in research. And you're going to find me talking a lot about the research. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the boys and girls at Amherst Middle School, who I love to talk about and brag about as much as I can. But what I really want to talk about is the research and the basis for what we're doing. We should base our research. I harp on my teachers all the time about best practice in research. And that's what we should be doing in our schools, and it bothers me when we don't. So you'll hear me refer to the research quite a bit. It's important to understand first that the current reform is supported by an often repeated narrative about our schools. I'll repeat it briefly, you've heard it before. New Yorkers are being led to believe that student test results have proven that their public schools fail to adequately prepare large percentages of students for life after high school, which is causing us to fall behind the rest of the world. We're being told that the score that a child receives on a high-stakes standardized test in 5th grade can somehow tell us whether or not that child is on a path to be college and career ready. And finally, New Yorkers are being told that high-stakes test-based accountability for children and teachers is critical to the improvement of public education. Now, I read a great book not long ago, maybe you've heard of it, called The Signal and the Noise, written by a guy named Nate Silver, who gained renown for accurately predicting presidential elections. And it was a really interesting book for a lot of reasons, and he tells us the signal is the truth, and the noise is that which distracts us from the truth. And clearly many New Yorkers have identified this narrative as the noise. They're not buying it. They don't believe it, and it's distracting us from the truth. My remarks tonight will point out the research behind the noisiness of the reform narrative and offer a way forward. I appreciate so much the fact that the membership here is focused on solutions. And one of the things that I hope to do tonight is offer a solution that the Partnership for Smarter Schools has developed. We represent hundreds of stakeholders from all walks of life in Western New York, and we've worked together to develop a set of ideas that we think might form the framework for a way forward. So we'll present that to you tonight. The current reform, in fact, has a very limited basis in our recent experience and in research to indicate its success. In fact, there are few, if any, examples of successful, large-scale, sustained implementation of a program that includes this combination of reforms. And I say large-scale because there's a very narrow band, a slim body of research that is really limited to charter schools. And you'll hear that talked about quite a lot, but understand that's a very narrow, limited band of research that supports the brand of reform that's being suggested here in New York. There is no evidence that students in countries who outperform American students on international tests do so because those countries test their students more often or hold their teachers accountable for student test scores. Most researchers agree, most notably here in Western New York, we have a great guy, Dr. Jack Lee, who is the Dean of the UB Graduate School of Education. He spoke at the Summit for Smarter Schools in October that Ray referenced. He stood and spoke eloquently about that simple fact, and he has a great perspective from which to view those international comparisons. And he says that the success that other countries might experience is due to other factors, not anything related to the way that we use student test scores to measure student achievement and measure teacher effectiveness. And take Finland, for example. Finland is often offered up to us as a model to follow. Finland does not make frequent use of standardized tests and does not use student performance to evaluate teachers. So as we hold up these models for success, and we should follow them, we need to look at the whole thing. We can't cherry pick. And the simple fact of the matter is, they don't test their students often, and they don't use student performance to evaluate teachers. The clear consensus of the research around student growth percentiles, which is what we use to evaluate teachers on the state portion of the 20%, and value-added measurement is that these models are not reliable, they're too volatile, and are invalid measures of teacher effectiveness. I know I have limited time. I'm not going to bore you with the research. I have 3 little snippets that I want to share. I share them again only to emphasize the fact that the research against what we're doing is significant. And these are 3 pretty well-renowned folks. You can find their work on the internet, and most importantly, you can find their work in peer-reviewed journals. And that's a critically important point, because when you look at research, you want to make sure that the methodology is valid. And you want to make sure that the research is reliable. So I chose these 3 for that reason. Bruce Baker from Rutgers and his team summed up his findings on student growth percentiles by saying that 2 recent working papers compare student growth percentiles and value-added measurements for teacher and school evaluations. Both raise concerns about the face validity of the statistical properties, which basically means the math doesn't work. The math doesn't work. For the purpose of starting conversations about student achievement, student growth percentiles might be a useful tool, but one might wish to use something different for rewarding teacher performance or making high-stakes teacher decisions. He added that even when you put the value-added pieces of it in, and you've heard a little bit about value-added if you follow the issue, his research says that teacher scores reflect student demographics more than they reflect teacher effectiveness. So the thing that's disappointing is you're being told that this is a way to accurately measure the effectiveness of your teachers, because what do we want? We all want effective teachers for our children. The simple reality is that the composite effectiveness score falls a little bit short of doing what they say, because the simple math doesn't work out. He concludes by saying that these measures lack face validity to such a degree that a teacher dismissed based on them would invite a challenge based on a teacher's constitutional Fourth Amendment right to due process. And this is a pretty well-renowned researcher writing this in a peer-reviewed journal. So that's a significant piece to note. Linda Darling-Hammond from Stanford summarized her suggestions for using value-added measurements, saying, with respect to value-added measurements of student achievement tied to individual teachers, current research suggests that high-stakes individual-level decisions or comparisons across highly dissimilar schools. That's what we do. We compare teachers who work in dissimilar schools with dissimilar student populations. She says that those comparisons should be avoided. Even in light of those conclusions, and dozens like them, the most convincing evidence came from the State Education Department's own website. Now, I'm going to suggest you do this. If you go on Engage New York, many of you have probably been there, and type in the little search box, research supporting all components of teacher and principal evaluation, you're going to get a list of 33 items. Okay? I was surprised when I looked at this, because I figured this is going to find all the stuff, right? All that I've been looking for that will tell me why we're doing this. What I found is there really isn't any peer-reviewed research, like the 2 pieces I read to you, that supports what we're doing. No success stories highlighting how a program using external accountability like what we're doing helps improve learning outcomes. No documentation describing research derived from piloting Common Core learning standards so we can benefit from lessons learned. In fact, there are no endorsements at all from anyone who thought that what we were doing was a really good idea. Now, if that stuff existed, would it be on the website? It's just not there. That was a little bit scary for me. Because again, I've been a good soldier for 20 years. And it's tough when you look on the website, you're looking for all the stuff that supports what's going on, and you don't find it. It's a little disappointing. So we spent the last few months admiring the problem. We've seen the reports, and if you follow Twitter, you can see, the Poughkeepsie meeting, and hopefully many of you were at the Summit for Smarter Schools. And we spent a lot of time reviewing the research and admiring the problem. And one of the things that I think, again, is great is the focus on solutions. And I want to take a minute before I close to talk a little bit about a solution that the Partnership for Smarter Schools would like to offer up as a framework for a way forward. Now, you've seen some press releases from St. E's, which represents school administrators, and from NYSET, and some other folks arguing for a moratorium. And we think that that is a prudent course to take, to pursue a revise and review period for 2 years is what we've suggested. You've seen different time periods offered up. This allows us to be thoughtful about continuing to implement parts of the plan around which there's consensus, and there is consensus around a couple of pieces of it, which I'll highlight, while modifying the implementation of those parts that need to be changed. A moratorium is not the final answer. Stopping is not the final answer. We need to move forward to something, but we need to move forward to something in a thoughtful way. Moratorium gives us time and space to have a public conversation about how to make sure that curriculum instruction and assessment supports the learning of every child. We didn't have a conversation about implementing the Common Core. We didn't have a conversation about how we should effectively evaluate the teachers. It was handed to us in exchange for $700 million. And it's time. I think it would be helpful for all of us if we engaged in a two-way conversation like the one that's being suggested here, so that we can really have a good conversation about how to support the learning of all children in our schools. During the review and revision period, the amount of student assessment would be significantly scaled back. First, we would take, and this will be a little bit technical, I'll try to make it simple, take all New York State assessments and make them program assessments, which is to say we wouldn't use them as measures of student learning, so we wouldn't put kids in AIS just based on that, and we wouldn't use them to evaluate teacher effectiveness. They'd be program assessments to evaluate the overall effectiveness of the curriculum instruction happening in schools, that's the way we used state assessments up until a couple of years ago. So we'd go back to something a lot like that. We'd support eliminating all state assessments for children in 3rd grade and below. We suggest that we limit the assessments for ELA and in math to 1 day, not 3. 3 days is a little bit silly. And if you ever have to work in a school, where you basically light a month on fire for state assessments, I mean, it's just, it's not a good use of time, and it's not, frankly, a good use of taxpayer dollars either. The time allotted for assessments would be scaffolded from 60 minutes for 4th graders up to 120 minutes for 7th and 8th graders. Proficiency levels would be set based on a raw score, not a scaled score. We would set that level prior to administration, not after. Teams of practitioners from public schools, colleges, and universities would either be the primary designers of assessments or at least finalize. Let's have people in the field take a look at these assessments before we put them out there to make sure that they're developmentally appropriate for children, because we've seen the problems, the tortoise and the hare, whatever it was, the pineapple, the hare, it's well documented, and there's a way to avoid that, and we ought to take advantage of the resources we have here with very good practitioners to do that. And all tests and answers will be made publicly available immediately upon administration. We'd suggest the State Education Department cease all their plans to share data beyond what they historically have done with BOCES. The department and the regional information centers. You know, Dr. Martzloff, I think he's spoken eloquently about the need to really take a good hard look at how we're using student data when it goes beyond the schoolhouse. And I think that's critical. We're also suggesting some sort of a shared decision-making process consistent with the Commissioner's regulations for shared decision-making. That would empower district and local superintendents to work with stakeholder groups to carry out a systematic review of learning standards, professional review standards, and existing, pending policy decisions. All districts and BOCES are required to seek out and give meaningful consideration to this kind of feedback, and we think that the State Education Department would reap the benefit from a reliable and ongoing dialogue with committed stakeholders around the state. Also, during the review period, we would keep the 60-point multiple measures score as it's in teacher contracts now. That way we don't totally upset the apple cart and try to find a way to use what's there. And I think most would agree that the rubrics that are out there, the rubrics that teachers are using, are at least consistent with the New York State teaching standards. I think most people agree that the New York State teaching standards are pretty good. And frankly, I think they're pretty good because there was a two-way conversation that resulted in their adoption instead of the one-way top-down process that gave us the rest of it. We would eliminate the use of student learning objectives. There's really no research basis for them telling us anything meaningful about a teacher's effectiveness. We also support limiting the Common Core learning standards to a series of pilots jointly run by SED and volunteer districts. The pilot period would include a full review of the standards by local and district superintendents and their stakeholder groups. And we need to do this, I think, because it would help us evaluate the degree to which the documented problems associated with the Common Core are a result of the standards themselves or a result of the implementation of the standards. It's one or the other. And unless we stop and figure out which one it is and then use those understandings and move forward, we're never really going to get anywhere. And it also accepts and acknowledges what I think we all at least agree with, is some districts are ready to take the Common Core standards and move forward with them. And if that's a local decision to do that, then they should be able to do that and work with SED to move ahead with those Common Core learning standards. If the board, the superintendent, and the stakeholder groups in that district want to do that, then they should be able to go ahead and do that, and then other districts can learn from their leadership and their experience in implementing the Common Core. So we offer that as a framework, some ideas. We appreciate the anxiety and the anger, frankly, that people have around testing in the Common Core, and we're really anxious for the day that we can move beyond that, because the energy, while worthy and important, it'll be so much better spent when we can focus on solutions and moving ahead and doing great things for our kids every day, which is really what we all want. So thank you very much to the members for offering the opportunity for this forum, and thank you very much to all of you for coming.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. If I could grab Mike, can I just grab you just for a second? I was at your Summit for Smarter Schools, and thank you very much. It was a terrific event, and it was great hearing the research. The researchers came in. Just a couple clarifications. I wanted to make sure that all of our colleagues got to hear what you had to say, because you did say some very important things. Just a real quick clarification for me. We were talking about, in terms of solutions, and I love the idea of solutions, combining tests so that you have a program assessment as opposed to lots of individual tests. Do you envision doing something like that, combining Common Core exams with Regents? I mean, how do we address Regents as an issue? Because that's kind of unique.
Because, it would be naive to say we should do no assessment at all of pre-K and kindergartners and first graders, but it has to be done in a developmentally appropriate way, in a way that provides a diagnosis for strengths and weakness. So one of the things I think I struggle with is, what they've done with 3 through 8 assessment gives assessment a bad name. Because nobody here is against assessment, but I think we have to do smart, thoughtful assessment. So I think that's what I would say about Regents, is I wouldn't let what they've done with 3 through 8 assessment completely tarnished the value that Regents exams hold. Like I said, they've had a good long run, and I think that they hold value. As a high school teacher and department chair, they held value for me because we more or less knew what was going to be there. We knew what the curriculum was. We could look at it after. You could disaggregate data and look at the question itself and understand if it was a problem with the question. You can understand, because it's really about how kids think. When you really look at data, you want to understand how a child thinks, or how a young adult thought, I should say, and help and use that information to inform your teaching and inform their learning. And the Regents exams offer us at least an opportunity to do that. And I would advocate that we continue to use Regents exams in that way. And I think they're a good gatekeeper. They're a reasonable measure of what students know and can do with respect to global studies and chemistry and the like.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Al?
All right, can you hear this?
I can, but I'm right next to you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have you taken a look at some of the Common Core standards that they put in place?
Yes.
Okay, now I have a degree in elementary education. I've read this.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out who the hell wrote this. Because whoever wrote it never passed. Now, with that said, after reading this, I'm still trying to get an answer to one question that I've asked all over the state. Can you explain to me why a first grader has to be able to point out where ancient Mesopotamia is on a map or a globe and discuss with me its contributions to modern day civilization? There's 6.
I think I have an answer.
Go ahead.
And I'm going to, Carol Burris, if you know Carol Burris, right? She did a thing, so I'm going to steal her answer. She did a thing on NPR with the Common Core Learning Standards. And she talked about the fact that the standards are back-mapped, right? So they started from college and career ready, whatever that means, right? It means something to David Coleman and the folks that wrote the Common Core Learning Standards. So they identified college and career ready, and then they back-mapped all the way to first grade. Kindergarten, I think they go to kindergarten, right? So they figured out where a kid should be in first grade based on where they think they should be in 12th grade, the end of 12th grade. The only problem is kids don't grow backwards.
And have you found this? Have you found the curriculum to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate?
No, in general, no. No. You can find spots where, the algebra that a kid learns at a certain grade in middle school makes some sense. But no, it's difficult to say, yes, they are developmentally appropriate. That's, you do your child's homework. My son's in 3rd grade. I worked on his homework last night, and there was a question my wife and I couldn't answer. My wife's a teacher too, so I seem to be struggling as well.
How is the morale in your school when it comes to teachers? How is the morale in your school when it comes to your students right now?
I'm going to give my teachers an awful lot of credit because they come to work every day and they put on the smiley face. You taught, when you teach, you sell. You sell in the curriculum. They do their absolute best every single day to work with children and help them feel honored as unique learners, even though the Common Core Learning Standards threatens to kind of standardize the instruction and assessment that we provide for children. So they do their absolute best every day to differentiate where they can, to move slow where they have to, and to help every child feel honored as a learner. So I think that helps a lot to the extent that we don't have miserable morale among the teaching ranks in students is really a credit to their good hard work. But I know from talking to them, and I'm in the classrooms every day, there's some tough, dark days because they love children and they want them to be successful and feel honored and have efficacy for the learning that they do in school. And there are days when that is really, really tough for them to do, but they find a way to do it.
Yeah, but when you teach in the classroom, you try to teach to the middle of the class. And then what happens is you give the seat work to reinforce what you've gone over. Then what you'll have is kids that are a little more advanced, you'll give them a little tougher stuff to do to keep them engaged. But that gives you the opportunity to go to the kids that did not get the lesson and to work with them individually. Because we know kids all learn different ways. Some are textual, they have to write it and write it. Some are visual, they have to see it over and over again. And some, it's auditory, they have to listen to it. So, I mean, what I'm seeing is the way that they're doing Common Core, they're not giving you the opportunity to be able to do that. And a lot of these lesson plans are very structured, saying you're going to teach 5 minutes of this, 10 minutes of that, give them this right now. So we're going to lose the whole bottom of the class. We may even lose the top of the class. So if you're strictly conforming with what they want you to conform, we're going to lose a lot of kids here. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I had some of my, and I think you're talking about the modules that the State Education Department
Right.
had created. I actually brought one of them with me. It was
Oh,
a
we've got some here too.
third grade module, and it's great reading. And it really, some of my teachers piloted their use. They did a unit, I give them credit. They tried it, they didn't dismiss it out of hand. They did one unit, and they said, that's it, I'm done. So we did a little action research. I like to be a lifelong learner, understand the instructional impact of all kinds of things. So they say, Mike, we're going to give it a try. We'll see how it is. I didn't ask them to do it. They did it themselves. They thought it was the right thing to do. They tried it. It did not work. It was not successful. It was very frustrating from a teacher perspective, even more frustrating from a student perspective. And they moved on, and we're using our own locally developed curriculum based on the Common Core learning standards, which allows us at least a little bit of flexibility to differentiate. But I'll say this too, from a funding perspective, what we find is the differentiation doesn't really happen as much in the classroom, the proper classroom. What happens is we have some students that get an extra period of math every other day. They get an extra period of math every day. They have to come after school for math because the differentiation can't happen in the classroom as it used to because of the developmentally appropriateness or lack thereof of the Common Core learning standards. So it has a cascading effect on lots of other aspects of the operation of the school and the way we deliver instruction as a school.
Okay, last question. Have you looked at the Engage New York, and have you looked at how they put this together? It's grammatically incorrect. It has, like here, count the apples in each tree, circle the numbers. There are no numbers, okay? This other one says, color and count the white circles blue. How do I do that? But this is the nonsense that they're
Carol
putting
Burris
out.
didn't give you the answer to that question, so.
To color them blue, the white circles?
I think we'd like to have better access to better resources.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. And next, if we can have Susan Dubill. Susan?
If anybody needs us to interpret for our Long Island colleagues, just let us know.
Forget about it.
Good evening. Until I put the sign up here, so you remember who I am. Thank you. My name is Susan Dubill, and I live in Clarence, New York, and I also teach there, and I prepared something to read. Help, I need somebody. Help, not just anybody. Help, I need someone. Help! I need a few minutes of your time to listen not just to me, but to all the students, parents, and teachers, administrators crying for help, just like in the lyrics of the Beatles song I just quoted. As a parent, I would like to advocate not just for myself, but for other parents as well. Parents in many walks of life are talking about the Common Core and testing. Because I'm a teacher, it is natural that I would have these conversations. What is unnatural is the amount of desperation and hopelessness I hear in the pleas for help. The parents acknowledge adamantly that the teachers in the school district are doing everything they can to provide a nurturing, safe, high-standard learning environment. Unfortunately, they also know that their hands are tied, unable to make necessary changes because of unfunded mandates connected to the Common Core and its high-stake assessments. Administrators and teachers work together with parents to educate our most valuable asset, our children, and the future. It is their chosen profession to mentor the next generation. Unfortunately, this process now includes a rise in anxiety for everyone involved. Although psychologists tell us some anxiety can be beneficial, an extreme amount is detrimental. Parents passionately tell me what is just common sense, that we all want our children to like school and want to go. Anything in life is like that. You will do better if you are motivated. Motivation does not come from stressed children, parents, and teachers. Many parents are not happy. They expect the education of their children to be developmentally appropriate, engaging, and led by the professionals who work with their children. At this time, that is not what is happening in education. Help change this situation with legislation that puts the decisions about instruction, testing, and funding back in the hands of the parents and the professionals. I could really use some help myself as a parent too. I am a parent of high schoolers, and they don't appreciate having double testing for the next 2 years to make sure that the common tests are valid and reliable. The test should only be given after they have been adequately field tested with time for both teachers and students to master the curriculum to benefit the students. This hurry-up implementation does not prepare anyone for future success. It is better, I guess, than giving them only the Common Core test and having them possibly not graduate on time. Aren't the teenage years stressful enough? Along the lines of reducing stress, I also advocate for the privacy of information about students being protected by law so everyone can be calm, confident, and judgment-free. I am not confident that this information would be kept safe and secure by any agency outside of the school district. As a teacher, I could use some help also. I love teaching. I have taught for over 25 years. It is my lifelong passion. I see and hear others that feel the same way. The passion is what makes us great. Back to the concept of motivation again. That's what makes my students great too. And as I look around at the overworked and stressed teachers around me, I am sad to see what is happening in my profession. High standards are essential. That is not the problem. Hard work is admirable. That is not the problem. The problem is in the one-size-fits-all formulas for students, teacher, learning, and assessment. The individuality is what makes America great. In the 1980s, when I first started teaching, I was told how behind in science and math our nation was compared to all the other countries. Well, a creative thought, which is now the internet, was born, which generated money from American-educated individuals to keep us strong. Many new jobs were created. Creativity and individualism help to keep us great, not conformity. So I say, use the diversity to strengthen the learning and teaching of students. Don't wipe it out. Embrace the passion that meetings such as these are invoking. We need to be passionate about education and our future. Please help us to do this with implementation of a change in policy. If one person or one group of people is unhappy, it could be something about them. But if everyone is unhappy, it seems that it is the system and leadership that needs a change. Help.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate your comments.
Just one quick question. What grade do you teach?
I teach 4th grade.
Okay, so I think that's actually perfect age group to ask this question, actually, because our previous speaker mentioned that children don't learn backwards. But in addition, when something like this is implemented, we're almost relying on the falsehood that fourth grader has already learned some of these Common Core, standards in third grade and second grade and first grade. And I was wondering if you could just highlight or speak a little bit about, what types of issues are coming up in terms of taking time away from instruction time to teach things that theoretically would have been taught in other grades, but they haven't been because every grade's getting forced to adopt this new curriculum all at once.
We are teaching Module 1 for the ELA, and it's a social studies curriculum about Native Americans. And the first thing that you need to know is our social studies curriculum has not taught that yet. And it talks about the Revolutionary War. That has not been taught yet. So basically what the teachers have to do is we have to spend at least an hour to change and fix the core curriculum, objectives, instruction, everything that we're doing to still be able to carry them out so the kids can understand it. So that's taking a lot of time. And that's just for basic things. We also have to add all of this, or parts of it, the social studies curriculum. And in my school, we divide up in, I teach the science to for 3 classes, because we switch for the content areas. And then there's a social studies teacher and a writing teacher. And the social studies teacher told me that she has to reteach. We have to also bring up concepts that we wouldn't bring up, and that's taking more time. Because they're not getting it younger, it's not developmentally appropriate because they don't understand that, and it's not even in the curriculum for social studies. So she has to continuously reteach and correct misconceptions. Another thing that we had in our core curriculum is, in the beginning, it takes a document, which is a primary document written down from oral language from the Iroquois Confederacy. And the students are supposed to read parts of this, which obviously they can't even read some of the vocabulary, and you'd have to have quite a large amount of background to really make it make sense. So then you can then write about it on top of it. There are 2 good books that we have. There's information that is good, and there are things that they have learned from this, but it is, in my opinion, it's not, you're not getting the bang for your buck, basically.
And just quickly then, are you finding that the students are, becoming much more confused than before because they're seeing concepts that they haven't seen before?
Definitely, and there are lessons that I know that will help with not just some of these social studies concepts that are based for ELA and for writing and for reading, but lessons that we did before that I knew were appropriate, and I'm putting those in, and those are the ones that I can see the most success with. And then we have to, on top of it, do the core curriculum standards, and like you're saying with the time and the differentiation, everyone is struggling, in our building, and it doesn't matter how long you have been teaching. People, like I said, they're tired, they're stressed, but they love children, and we just do the best that we can, but we're asking for a change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Next we have Scott Marzloff. He's the superintendent of schools from Williamsville Central School District.
Sorry about the delay. My name is Scott Marzloff. Retzloff, and I am the superintendent of schools in the Williamsville Central School District, school district in suburban Buffalo of slightly more than 10,000 students. And I'm also the parent of a 2nd grader, a 4th grader, and a 5th grader. First of all, I want to thank members of the New York State Assembly who are here this evening to hear concerns from educators and parents. New York State adopted the Common Core standards in 2010. And now, 3 years later, we are finally starting to talk about whether or not it makes sense for our most precious resource, our children. Preceding and including this time period, we have had education reform commissions without educators on them, a Regents reform agenda that includes the Common Core implementation, changes to teacher and principal evaluation systems that now include student test scores, along with massive decreases in New York State funding for public education. Over the past few years, concerns about the Common Core implementation in New York State have often been dismissed or worse, not even heard. These changes have been implemented swiftly and ferociously with little regard for how they truly impact children. Anyone that speaks up to offer suggestions for improvement or ask for more time to implement these massive systemic changes is painted quickly as an obstructionist, apathetic, or stuck in the status quo. I am not asking you this evening to completely change everything, but clearly there are actions that can be taken now to make our pre-K through 12 education system in New York State better for children. Now, I have to tell you, I came prepared this evening to speak at length about the Common Core curriculum, not about the Regents reform agenda. While there is some information sprinkled in here about the reform agenda with APPR and the focus on test scores and those sorts of things, most of my discussion is about the Common Core curriculum, and it is the least of our problems. The Common Core curriculum, there's been many curricula tried and implemented over decades in New York State and all across the country. We just recognized a teacher in Williamsville at our recent Board of Education meeting. Mrs. Syracuse is in her 41st year as a teacher in New York State, and all in Williamsville. And she lamented how she's been through something called individualization. Never heard of that. Criterion referenced. Not sure what she's talking about. Continuous progress. All right, now I'm starting to catch up. Whole language and the Common Core. All those different initiatives, changes, really, while there was some discussion about them, have never been to the point where they are today. Because let's be clear, the issue is less about the Common Core curriculum implementation and more about the stress and anxiety that everyone is under and the pressure that educators, parents, students are perceiving, whether real or perceived, the pressure that they're under to produce results. And quite frankly, I'm surprised we haven't had more situations like they've had in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., where there's been widespread allegations of cheating on the test because there's much at stake. The Common Core standards represent a core set of academic standards that were nationally and internationally benchmarked. They provide a common foundation and are intended to be the central or most important elements of a district's curriculum. The federal government's Common Core initiative also gave each state flexibility to add to this core set of standards. In turn, New York State has given school districts the ability to focus on their own unique interests and best respond to the needs of their students. For example, in Williamsville, we are implementing the modules for ELA, but not in mathematics. Also in the Williamsville Central School District, teachers, administrators, and district staff responded immediately when New York State adopted the Common Core standards by forming curriculum teams and by developing and providing professional development for our teachers prior to the implementation statewide. As a result of this work, teams refined and expanded their focus on various topics at each grade level as needed to either respond to any potential gaps from the previous standards or to address areas in which students might encounter challenges. Because this type of curriculum work is recursive, again, we've been doing it for decades, this was and continues to be a coordinated and focused effort among our teachers and administrators. Overall, within our district, the Common Core has been found to be a well-structured set of standards that are causing educators to better focus their instruction and reflect more deeply on the processes and practices of teaching students across content areas. Like any set of standards, they are not perfect. Education and research, which includes curriculum enhancement, continues to evolve. And at a minimum, the Common Core, we believe, has encouraged greater rigor and higher degrees of critical thinking than ever before. It is important to note that in addition to implementing the Common Core standards, the state required school districts to simultaneously implement new assessments, a new evaluation system for teachers and principals, as well as other unfunded mandates. The effect of this change on people cannot be ignored. Unfortunately, school districts were at the mercy of the state implementation timeline, which is simply too fast. The state's timeline was unrealistic for any district to implement the Common Core standards to the fullest extent. In feedback given directly to Dr. John King and Ken Slentz from the State Education Department by our district staff, it was shared that the State Education Department's implementation timeline was too hurried and would not provide districts the necessary time to adequately prepare curriculum and materials. It is our understanding that the Common Core authors themselves suggested that there would be great difficulty with effective implementation of the Common Core prior to September 2013. In response, Dr. King and Mr. Slentz reasoned that New York State was awarded Race to the Top money based on its proposed timeline. They also said that students did not deserve to wait another year for the Common Core, stating, "We don't have time to waste. Too many kids are failing." This has unfortunately become the common refrain heard when initiative needs to be rushed along in its implementation. As stated earlier, anyone that asks for a reasonable time frame to reasonably implement such a large change as the Common Core implementation, you're quickly dismissed as someone who does not desire accountability or simply wants to maintain the status quo. Our concern, and one shared among school districts, is the inefficient time to effectively unpack the standards, write new curriculum, develop and deliver professional development, and identify or build resources to deliver the curriculum. Although you may hear that the Common Core was around since 2010, not one Common Core module was released by the New York State Education Department prior to September 2012, and even then the new modules were released piecemeal throughout last school year, along, by the way, with 5 different changes to the 135-page New York State Education Department guidance document for APPR. A longer implementation window would have afforded districts the time to adequately respond to professional development needs and actually allow teachers to adjust their practice before implementing new assessments, unproven assessments at that, connected to their evaluations. While testing has always been a present in New York State, some students may experience test anxiety. Students' attitudes toward learning largely, I don't believe, are shaped by tests. Rather, attitudes are shaped by their experiences and the messages they receive from those around them. The Common Core standards have resulted in an increased focus on content development. Some of these instructional approaches, such as helping students develop a deeper conceptual understanding of content, take more effort on everyone's part, certainly by teachers, students, and parents. It may cause students a certain level of challenge, which in turn is unsettling to some of us. The new state tests or any large shift in curriculum or instructional practice can bring about negative reactions if teachers do not acquire the necessary information, skills, or background knowledge to adapt their instruction. Also, we cannot ignore another major concern about this assessments, which stems from how test scores are now being used as a component of evaluations. This has caused teachers to feel a great deal of additional pressure as it relates to the outcome of the test. One of the other major flaws of the New York State testing protocols is that teachers, administrators, school boards do not get to see the results of the tests. The State Education Department only releases about 25% of the items because they want to reuse questions for future tests. This practice unfortunately defeats the best purpose of assessment, especially in grades 3 through 8, when the assessment should be used as a tool to improve teaching and learning. Another item related to testing protocol is timeliness. Certainly districts have been in a great hurry to implement all of this as required by the New York State Education Department. However, I would ask that the State Education Department be in a little bit more hurry to provide timely feedback to students, parents, and school districts. They actually moved the test from May until April in order to provide themselves with more time to calculate the results and provide those to districts, teachers, and parents in a more timely way. Providing these results 5 months later is not helpful nor meaningful. Local district administrators have been instrumental in implementing the Common Core. Working together with teachers, principals, and others have done a tremendous job. In terms of the financial aspect, funding to support all of these efforts was and continues to be a major consideration, as monies from Race to the Top were very limited. You heard Mr. Cornell mention $700 million. Not much of that got to the school district level. In our school district, we had slightly more than $70,000 that was provided to the Williamsville School District that was doled out over a 3-year period. The cost of implementation for the Regents Reform Agenda is well over $1 million and counting. Certainly during the most prolonged period of financial retrenchment for school districts in recent history, these added costs are incredibly difficult for school districts to grapple with. While the demands of the Common Core implementation demands time of principals, curriculum leaders, and others has been enormous, the amount of time spent working together on the quagmire also represents one of the bright spots about the reform agenda. Principals and teachers are having many more conversations about what excellent teaching and learning should look like at all levels of our school district. In Williamsville, for example, our administrators and teachers collaborated on selecting a teacher evaluation rubric. Training was held and follow-up occurred. Observations and follow-up discussions with teachers now take place at least twice per year rather than once every 3 years. I also lastly would like to talk about student data, something that I'm quite passionate about. In Williamsville, every effort is made to keep student data secure and follow mandated data collection processes and reporting requirements. If you like, I can provide for you a list of reports that our school district and all school districts in New York State provide to the State Education Department. It is enormous. For many years, all school districts have been required to submit information to both state and federal agencies. Regarding the new education data portal in New York State, there is great concern regarding the reporting of data to outside entities and security of data that is kept by third-party vendors such as InBloom. There is no current parental opt-out option for this New York State Education Department initiative. Despite repeated assurances by the state, no one can guarantee that the information will be secure. Just look at the issues of confidentiality at the federal level. What happens to the data in the future? Does it become part of a national tracking database, or could it be sold someday to another company or to advertisers? Could the data be used to be held against a student later in life when applying for college or even a job? These are just a few of the major concerns that I have as not only the superintendent of schools, but also as a parent. In addition, like many districts, we already have a parent and teacher portal developed by and customized for our school district. The Williamsville Information Tracking System maintains all required data and is compliant with all state and federal reporting requirements. The InBloom program would be an expensive redundancy, mandated cost between $1 and $5 per student for our school district and represents yet another unfunded state mandate. As a superintendent of schools and a parent of 3 young children, I believe student and parent data, by the way, is sacrosanct. The Williamsville School District has no plans to share this confidential information with a third-party vendor, and I urge the State Education Department to reconsider this ill-conceived initiative. I also urge you to pass legislation immediately to protect the privacy of our parents and our children. In conclusion, I'll echo some of the other comments. Please slow these initiatives down. Appoint a group of educators to study the Common Core, APPR, and other recent systemic changes. Eliminate the need to share data with third-party vendors. Insist that any new mandate or initiative that comes from New York State be thoroughly studied with true input from teachers in the field. Lastly, please consider becoming a leader in changing the tenor of conversation regarding public education. It has become popular to attack teachers, administrators, and our entire public education system. While there is always room for growth and improvement, like there is everywhere, we need to stop vilifying those who are trying to shape the minds of our children and prepare them for the challenges of the future. Lastly, I will mention that at 4:47 p.m. this evening, while I was in line at Wegmans before I came here, I received an email from Pearson informing me that I needed to provide 41 new field tests for our students in Williamsville this school year, 34 of which will be online. I can't believe that this continues to move forward with online testing. Haven't we learned from what's going on with healthcare? Thank you very much.
Your point is very, very well taken, very timely. Thank you. Just an FYI too, this past session, the Assembly did pass a bill that would protect student data. I don't know if did it go through the Senate? I don't think the Senate didn't take that up or didn't pass it, but there are efforts on our side in our House to move forward, and I think you bring up some very, very valuable points on that. Just another issue too, in case anyone didn't know this, when we were negotiating the budget this past spring, one proposal that the governor had made would be to give each district the ability to waive any reporting requirements that they didn't deem necessary. All they needed to do was send a letter to the state ed saying, for these reasons, we do not believe it's necessary for us to provide these reports. That piece of language was ultimately taken out of the bill and was not included in the final budget. That's something I know my office has brought up and some of my colleagues' offices have brought up. That is something that I don't think we should let drop either. I think it's up to the local districts to decide what you need to do. And if you don't have the flexibility to make those decisions, then you're going to have a lot of costs going forward that aren't necessary. So I do want you to know that on the Assembly side, and particularly our minority comments, we are very aware of those as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Does anyone, here we go.
Scott, good to see you again. I've always looked up to you.
That was a cheap one, Steve.
Thank you very much. 2 questions. How much is this implementation cost your district? And secondly, how much have you received back in funding?
In Race to the Top funding, we've received a little more than $70,000 over a 3-year period. In terms of what we've spent, we're well over $1 million and counting in terms of professional development for teachers, time to create assessments, time to write curriculum, time to have professional development around the modules, time to grade assessments. My largest concern, besides the student data piece that I didn't share, has to do with time. We have way too much time where our teachers are being taught by substitute teachers in order to get all the other things done in terms of training. so as educators, we tend to do what we're told and we want to do things right. So in order to do it the right way, we have to take this time to work with our teachers, and so we've done that. But in the end, it's the children who are suffering because they don't have their first team teacher, so to speak. They're working with a substitute all too often.
Unfunded mandates over and over again, we hear at the local level, whether it's school districts, whether it's municipalities, over and over and over again. The pushback, the cost comes back to you and me. And this can't continue on. We of course, were promised several years ago that if we implemented the tax cap, the unfunded mandate relief would follow soon thereafter. We're not holding our breath because we'd all be passed out by now. Keep up the good work in Williamsville. Good to see you again.
On this one too, what you anticipate is going to cost you to move forward from here to implement Common Core?
That's difficult to predict. Certainly, we are going to continue with professional development. We have the module implementation that we're doing for ELA, not for mathematics. Also, the whole online testing piece, and there are significant costs to implementing that in terms of what types of devices can be used, that keyboards have to be part of the devices, so on and so forth. All of the data that has to be reported on student-teacher linkages, but based on how much time a teacher spends with a particular student, all of that has to be organized in a meaningful way and provided back to the state education department as well. So there are tremendous hidden costs behind the scenes as well of things that districts have to do. We're fortunate in Williamsville. We have good resources in our school district. I'm not sure how other districts are getting this done. I worked in a small school district before I came to Williamsville, and it must be an enormous undertaking, particularly for some of our smaller districts.
Did you price out the data mining?
I'm sorry?
Did you price out the amount it would cost you for the data mining to hire an outside company?
It's between $1 and $5 per student. You get 4 choices among companies. There's Datacation, in Bloom, a couple other ones, and they range in cost from $1 to $5 per student. So for us, it would be between about $10,000 and $50,000 to provide them our data. I'd like to know where that $10,000 to $50,000 is to do their field test for them. I think Pearson should pay for that.
Just 2 more things. You getting pushback from the parents on the data mining part of this? A lot of parents saying, I don't want my child's information put out there?
I don't know if it was pushback. I think it's more support, because this is one area where we've tried to get out in front. One of the things I was told by an official from the state education department is you'll be sacrificing the rest of your race to the top dollars that you haven't spent yet. And I said, well, that's fine because we spent all ours already.
Well, it costs you more than that. The last one, Board of Regents announced today that they're going to be cutting the time for the test, and they're going to be cutting the tests, what the kids are going to be tested on, but they're going to be cutting the time of the test by 10 minutes. Any reaction to that?
To me, it's like trying to empty out Lake Ontario with a teaspoon or a water hose. It's a small little piece, perhaps as a signal that they're hearing some of the concerns. The tests have gotten longer, and students have also up to 25%, for example, in mathematics, have 25% less time to complete them. So we're asking students to show what they know and what they can do, or are we asking them how fast they can do something? So there's that concern, and I'd like to see the state education department take a little bit more of an aggressive approach. Certainly 3rd grade is a little bit young for a state test. 4th grade, I think we could live with that. I think maybe 4th, 6th, and 8th. Let's start there. Let's look at 3 through 8 testing. I share with parents all the time that, there's AIS implications and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, the performance of a child on a 3 through 8 test is not going to determine what college they get into. They're going to have enough high stakes to high school and start taking high school credit-bearing courses. That's when really it does get high stakes, and you know, we start really sorting and classifying students, I guess. But I really think we could reduce the number of tests that are given, particularly in the 3 through 8 grade range. I understand the need for some testing. We spend $55 billion a year in New York State on public education. There needs to be some type of measurement. I understand that. But right now, there's too much pressure, too much anxiety, and we need to reduce that.
Scott, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Okay, next we have Heidi Indelicato. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if I mess that up. Sorry. And as Heidi's walking up to the podium, I have to apologize. No, I'm so interested in what everyone's having to say. We're running behind schedule, and I have like 15 people who have requested to speak, and I'm supposed to leave the room here at 8 o'clock. So if I could just ask everyone who's going to be speaking, if you just keep your comments as succinct as possible, that would be helpful. I don't want to miss out on anybody who requested to speak. So thank you very much. Heidi?
Thank you for hosting this educational forum, and I might have to fumble a little bit with the mic after following Mr. Marteloff, because obviously I'm as tall as he is. So here I go. Let me just, okay. I feel a little intimidated as well. I am a parent in Lancaster, New York. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a superintendent or principal. I'm an RN. I have a degree in Bachelor of Science, which I sometimes struggle with too in helping my children with their homework. Funny thing. My husband and I have 3 boys, 9, 6, and 3. And I just wanted to start with the comment that Arnie Duncan made to a group of state school superintendents. He says he finds it fascinating that some of the opposition to the Common Core state standards has come from, and I quote, white suburban moms who all of a sudden their child isn't as brilliant as they thought they were. Doesn't really make sense, that statement. And their school isn't quite as good as they thought it was. That is truly an appalling, not to mention, racist and sexist remark coming from the Secretary of Education of the state. This to me demonstrates a true disconnect and disrespect from Mr. Duncan, and shows just how out of touch government is in regards to local level education. I attended a very informative educational summit, the Partnerships for Smarter Schools in Buffalo at Kleinhans, which there were 2,500 people in attendance. People of all color were there. Mothers and fathers were present. This white suburban mom was present. And while I want my children to succeed, the priority in our home is always do your best, enjoy school, and we will always be proud of you. People have left New York State in hopes of having a better life and more employment opportunity to only return to New York State because of our excellence in education. The government manufactured a crisis with manipulated data, and the unmanipulated data proved that. Our local school district of Lancaster was improving its numbers and had success before Race to the Top and Common Core state standards were started. I could go on for hours of the problems and defects of the current educational reform. Many already have. I would instead like to present to you observations we have made in our district as parents, educators, and healthcare professionals. Children are becoming defeated. Children are becoming disengaged. Children are becoming depressed. Children are becoming more anxious. Children are losing their self-worth. Children are regressing. And children are being left behind. These are the truths of the children that are overwhelmed by countless test prep and assessments. These are the truths of those children that cannot be helped by their teachers simply because there's not enough time nor resources. What about the children that are gifted, that are so overwhelmed, like they said, about double workload, that they can't take it anymore and think of taking their own life? Yes, there have been children that thought that and have been admitted to the hospital. This curriculum narrows and creates a one-size-fits-all approach to education. Every child is a unique individual and learns at a different pace. Experts have stated the curriculum, especially in the younger, more vulnerable ages, is a developmentally inappropriate curriculum. It is a program that goes beyond their prefrontal cortex development. I ask you, why is this okay? Why do we accept this flawed curriculum? More rigor? Rigor. Rigor is defined as a difficult and unpleasant condition or experiences. Strictness or severity, a harsh or cruel act. This is not a word I want attached to my child's curriculum. These state assessments demonstrated this very definition by making 8, 9, 10-year-olds sit there for 90 minutes and special needs doubling that time for 6 days, taking tests that were above their level of educational ability. This is child abuse in my mind. The fact is, we adopted the Common Core standards and its assessments sight unseen to ensure race to the top funding, taxpayer money, mind you, during a recession. No one looked at its validity and no one saw the lack of transparency and accountability. But we do now. Thousands upon thousands of educators, administrators, healthcare professionals, and parents report those concerns daily. The Board of Regent Lester Young Jr., who was in attendance at the Poughkeepsie meeting with Commissioner King, stated it best. He stated that all good ideas live and die by execution. We want to hear how it's going in the field. Really? Who is listening? Not the commissioner, not the New York State Education Department, and not the governor. They do not want to admit they made a mistake. The government suspended the healthcare exchange because they saw mistakes and flaws. We've had many apologies from the president. Why are we not doing the same with something as important as education? The very thing that is shaping the future of America. They need to admit there are flaws and work with the local educators as they all stand up and share their concerns. Why are we not listening to all these professionals in the business of education? Bill Gates said it himself. We will not know if this curriculum will be beneficial for possibly 10 years. My children and your children don't have 10 years. They will never get these precious years back. This is why I will not vote for anyone who supports the substandard curriculum, nor anyone who does nothing to help fix it. All assessments should be designed by the New York educators at the local level that have proficiency levels based on a raw score and set prior to the administration of the test and be available to educators, children, and families immediately after it is given. This is the only way teachers and parents can measure the strengths and weaknesses of the child. Tests that are developmentally inappropriate, sealed, and that makes teachers sign affidavits to not discuss with anyone are not tests I will allow my children to take. They will refuse these tests. And they will refuse these flawed and invalid assessments every year until they're gone. I urge you all to visit the classrooms and talk with the teachers and listen to the concerns of the parents of how these standards and assessments are proving to be harmful to our children. We need your support in proposing bills and support in telling the New York State Education Department and the governor we need change now. We need to get testing right and bring back local control in our schools. All of these innocent little lives depend on it. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments. Next we have Lorraine Gamick, coming, a teacher, Lorraine. I hope I'm saying that name right. There we go. Thank you, Lorraine.
My name is Lorraine Gamick, and I am a teacher at Batavia High School, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. In New York State, we all know that all students are assessed. 98% of the students in the state take the Regents exams at the high school and other state assessments in the lower grades. I'm a teacher of students who take the New York State Alternate Assessment, or the NYSA, as it's called by state ed. According to section 100.1 of the regulation of the Commissioner of Education, a NYSA eligible student is defined as a student with severe disabilities and refers to students who have limited cognitive abilities combined with behavioral and or physical limitations and require highly specialized education and or social, psychological, and medical services in order to maximize their full potential for useful and meaningful participation in society and for self-fulfillment. Students with severe disabilities may experience severe speech, language, and or perceptual cognitive impairments and challenging behaviors that interfere with learning and socialization opportunities. These students may also have extremely fragile psychological conditions and may require personal care, physical, verbal supports, and assistive technology. Approximately 1 to 2% of the students in the state fall into this category. So it's a very small group of people. The students in this category that are able to have a career could be in jobs similar to the cart person at your grocery store, or they would be employed at the ARC in a workshop, or in a daycare facility like we have in Elba, New York. I can't say it strongly enough. Our severely handicapped students are being excessively assessed. This year, the NYSA is aligned to the Common Core state standards in English and math. In the 2013-14 school year, a high school age student, severely handicapped, will take 28 state assessments. They will do 14 baseline assessments and 14 post-assessments. And they are as follows. In English, they will do 10 assessments. In math, they will do 10 assessments. In science, they will do 4 assessments. And in social studies, they will do 4 assessments. These assessments are starting in grade 3, and they are assessed yearly until grade 8. When they reach high school, they are assessed once in their high school career, and that is in the year that they turn 18. The NYSA testing areas are math and English at the elementary level, math, English, and science at the middle school level, math, English, science, and social studies at the high school level. And each of those levels is divided into a level of complexity. So, for example, high school math, I have the less complex level, the middle complex level, and the more complex level, depending on a student's their disability and what they are able to do. One of the issues that we are facing this year is, and when I came back to my principal and talked about this, they were like, no, this can't be. We have to create the assessments. This year, well, I only have one student that falls into being 18 years old during this assessment period. It is conceivable that there are high school teachers who will have to create 42 baseline assessments and 42 post-assessments that must be approved by their superintendent prior to being given. A teacher at the elementary or the middle school level, because of the small number of students in this category, have multiple grade levels that they teach. It is conceivable, and actually my colleague at Batavia Middle School has 108 assessments to create and teach, and give. It is inconceivable to me. So what happens? We create the baseline assessment. This is the directions that we were given on September 30th. And we're told the baseline assessments need to be done by mid-November. Okay, September 30th, we got these at a meeting. You start creating these assessments. The testing window ends February 7th. So these students who fall into the severe cognitive disability level have 5 months to show growth. A high school student who is not disabled gets 4 years to take 10 to 14 Regents exams. My students have 28 exams to do in 5 months and show growth. This is ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous. When the students, I create the baseline assessment, they have to get a 74 or lower. If they score higher than a 74, it is an invalid assessment and I can't use it. I spent 8 hours creating 5 assessments, of which my student got between a 75 and a 79. None of those assessments are usable. I can't report them. These are reported through Measured Progress. It's an online reporting. You can't even enter them in. They won't allow you to enter a score lower than a 74. I wasn't able to use them. I had to go to a higher level of complexity. In the past, we've always done, this is my 7th year teaching this group of students, and we've always done state assessments. In the 3 levels of complexity, you had the student will recognize a sentence. And the middle complexity was the student will recognize a sentence with capitalization error. And then the highest level, the student will recognize a sentence with capitalization and punctuation errors. This year, there is no connection between the 3 levels of complexity. What is the lowest level has nothing to do with what the middle level is, has nothing to do with what the highest level is. My colleague at the middle school has 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at all 3 levels in those grades. Her 108 assessments, it is an impossible task. I believe the Williamsville superintendent talked about the possibility of cheating, and we have talked about that. When you have this many assessments to do in a 5-month period, and you have students at every one of those levels of complexity, and every one of them is different, how are you supposed to teach this? The baseline assessment is given. You are not supposed to give the post-assessment for at least 15 school days. That can stretch out 1 extension. There are 5 extensions in English. There are 5 extensions in math to be given. 1 extension, the teacher would have to teach it for the 5th grade in 3 different levels, for the 6th grade in 3 different levels, 7th grade 3 different levels, 8th grade 3 different levels, get all that done. That's just 1. It's just 1. You've got the next extension and all those levels, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's just inconceivable that this can happen. What else has to happen during all of this? They have emotional outbursts. They have physical outbursts. You're attacked, you're bitten, you're kicked, you're spit on. They have OT, PT, speech, counseling, art therapy, physical therapy, adaptive physical education. All those are happening at the same time. This is impossible to do. Some of the high school students, due to their severe disabilities, are developmentally at 1 to 3 months age. This year, and I quote, we are being asked to create an equation and/or an inequality based on a given situation. This is the lowest level at the high school level that I'm allowed to assess. There are 4 more areas to be assessed. The student will complete a function table, f of x such that x is blah, blah, blah. Remember, students at the developmental level of 1 to 3 months are asked to do this. The student will identify a geometric shape and/or concept on the coordinate grid. The student will identify the median and/or outlier on a box and whisker plot. The student will determine the appropriate measurement tool for a real-world situation. In English, the student will recognize an emotion and a qualifier in an informational text. I have a master's degree in literacy, and I didn't know what a qualifier was. I went to the AP English teacher and said, I'm feeling really, really stupid. What's a qualifier for an emotion? And he couldn't tell me. We found out, we had to do some searching, it's an adverb, but not all adverbs are qualifiers. Okay, we won't do that one, we'll go on. I don't know, in all of my teaching, I've never seen students as upset. My student asks me every time she does an assessment for me, she basically has to fail it. You cannot teach them anything before you give them this assessment. So recognizing a geometric shape on the coordinate grid, I hand her a coordinate grid with a square on it. She has to compute the perimeter. I can't tell her what that means. And she looks at me and she says, I don't know what to do. I said, honey, you just did your best. What do you think this might mean? Do your best. And then we can have some ice cream. So she hands me back her paper. We had 4 pages, 1 coordinate grid on each page. And on the first page, she just repeated my square in all 4 quadrants. And on the next page, her square turned into a little door. And on the next page, it was a set of steps going up to the little door. And on the last page, it was a castle with a moat and a little princess. She's supposed to be doing the perimeter. And she comes to me and she says, Mrs. Gimmick, did I pass? Did I do okay? I told her, honey, you did just what I needed you to do. She got a 0. That's what I can use this assessment now. She has a difficult time with one-to-one correspondence, row counting, count the squares, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a very difficult time with that, but she's supposed to be computing the perimeter. I'm asking you, the Assemblymen and women of this state, to act. I'm not opposed to challenging my students to be as independent as possible. I do it every day in my classroom. I have parents who come to me, and we can't make it through a parent-teacher conference without crying. Because what's going to happen to my child when I can't take care of them anymore? When I die, who is going to take care of them? Who is going to watch out for them? They will be living with me forever. There are no more group homes to go into. Group homes are, the waiting list is 20 years on a group home. That's not an exaggeration. What is going to happen to my child? The student that I have now, her mother came to me and said, are you kidding me? I want her not to get ripped off when she goes to Subway and buys a sub. You need to be teaching her money. There is no money in the curriculum. We do not, according to the curriculum for the alternate education for the NISA, there is no money to be taught. They were supposed to have gotten that in 3rd grade. There's no money. There is no personal management. There is no social skills. You don't go into somebody else's space. This, 2 weeks ago, what I focused on in my classroom with one student was you pull up your pants before you come out of the bathroom. That is much more socially important for you than whether you can identify an outlier on a box at risk for class. The anxiety over these testing for my students and for my colleagues is crippling. My colleague at the middle school is a long-term sub for a teacher on maternity leave. We have cried. I can't tell you, I have cried more this year than I have in my whole, how are we going to get this done? Our state scores are tied to this. In the teacher composite score, our 20% is this. They're not going to show growth. They can't even count. Some of them don't even have a concept that there's numbers. But our state scores are tied to this.
Hours at home crying and having behavioral meltdowns because he did not want to go back to school. There were several instances when he had to be physically taken into the building. These behaviors did not occur at school prior to his participation in the state testing. In spite of regular therapy sessions, he now has to be medicated in order to be able to function in school. I have a 9-year-old on Prozac. After living through this experience, Commissioner King's letter to parents stating that New York's children were expected to perform lower on the state tests was insulting. Clearly, the people involved in educational reform in New York State have never worked with or been associated with a child with disabilities, and I challenge them to walk in our shoes.
Ultimately, being
Thank
very
you.
done. Oh, perfect. That was great.
Next we have Teresa Ladabero. Thanks, Teresa.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Leatherbarrow. I recently moved from the city of Buffalo to Amherst, New York, so I suppose it makes me one of these suburban white moms. But I'm not here because of black or white. The color that's the problem is green. Common Core is not about providing a level playing field for our children. Common Core is about money. Please make no mistake about it. To begin, the problem has never been the lack of standards or the effectiveness of our teachers. The problem for many of our struggling babies and high school dropouts is poverty. Our schools are a mirror of the community they serve, and with the proper funding going directly to classrooms. Yes, classrooms, not supervisors, not coaches, not educational consultants. If it went to classrooms, we could begin to provide programs and resources to address the needs of these communities. And the needs are great. With this belief, I'm here to say that a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching and learning is leaving many of our children with nothing to wear. What we are giving them simply doesn't fit. Here's the bottom line. Common Core serves corporations. It is not about children. Bill Gates and Pearson are making millions, while our teachers go to FedEx Kinko's and use their own money because they can't get a working copy machine to stay unjammed long enough to complete a job. Money that could be spent in the classroom for meaningful field trips, instrumental music programs, translators for our 30-plus languages, and additional teachers so we don't have 30 kids in a class. This money never reaches the classroom. It's intercepted long before that and is spent on web-based testing programs, data warehouses, and BS positions with the words educational consultant at the end of their title. We need more hands on deck, and we need more people working directly with children instead of sitting in their offices making Excel sheets about students whose names they can't even pronounce. As a result of the Common Core, our children have less time for social studies, science, music, and art, because we are pushing them through a system that seeks to conform each member. Common Core teaches our children to spew back answers like little robots, citing text-based evidence. But our colleges and our workforce, they want creative problem solvers. They don't want children who answer everything the same and act like everybody else. Music and arts programs, they awaken the areas of our brain, and our children who participate in these programs do better academically. But these programs are being cut, and they are practically extinct in many of our inner city schools. Our math modules, I'm going to be blunt, our math modules are like math on meth. It's bad enough they aren't even written yet for the year, and that we are building the plane up in the air. They jump around from skill to skill. They move way too fast. They overcomplicate simple skills and fail to explain more difficult concepts. And in many instances, the lessons go contrary to the standards they are supposed to be addressing. The whole program is a hot mess. Our standardized testing system is a complete sham. The tests are secure. There is no way to prove that the answer key even matches the questions. The tests are scored, destroyed, and then the scale was determined as to the proficiency levels. So let's wait and see how the kids do, and then we'll decide what you need to get in order to pass. There's no validity in this. Students across the state scored high marks on their local exams, but they did not pass the state test, even though their local exams were based on the same common standards. To use an engaged New York term, where is the reasonableness in this? And I'm sorry, but in Bloom, it just scares me. It's got lawsuit written all over it. Any money that schools get from Race to the Top, and I'm proud to be a part of Williamsville, but any money that we're taking from that in exchange for our students' personal records, as far as I'm concerned, that's blood money. If you hear nothing else tonight, please hear that we need to protect our students' privacy. The list of problems is long. Common Core is a slow and painful death to public education. But you are our public servants. Please act on our behalf. Look around. We're not just a special interest group. We're not just a group of angry white suburban moms. We are teachers, we are parents, we are community members, and we care about our children's education. And I believe that you do too. Please stand with us. Please take our advice from our wonderful leader from our Partnership for Smarter Schools. Please institute a moratorium. Please get rid of Dr. John King. And please say no to Common Core. Thank you so much for your time. I would stay here till midnight, I swear to God. This is so valuable. Thank you.
And thank you, Teresa. We appreciate your comments and your sticking around. Thank you very, very much. Next we have Regina Stasiak, teacher from Clarence Schools.
Good evening. My name is Regina Stasiak. I'm a math teacher at Clarence High School. Thank you very much for hosting this event for us. I've been a math teacher for 31 years. I've lived in New York State all my life. When I was growing up, New York State and California were the two top education systems in the country. I have 4 brothers and sisters that have moved around the country benefiting from their New York State education. I have 3 children that are in college right now. One would like to be a professional athlete, one would like to be an elementary ed teacher, and one would like to be a female engineer. So I have the gamut. I do not want to be a complainer. I'm here to reiterate what everyone is saying tonight so well, but it's because I care. I don't want to just complain. I love my job. The one thing I consider very important about my job is that my students need to trust me. I teach math at high school. I teach Algebra 2 Trig, which in all honesty has been a little bit of a difficult subject to teach with the last change that came about. But my students need to believe in me that I can get them from point A to point B in an efficient method where they can feel comfortable with what they're learning and successful with what they're learning. That is my job. And as I watch my algebra teachers right now, they are not confident, they are not secure, they are very stressed, and they want to do well. And as you know, as a math teacher, with these modules coming out with mistakes in them, they're late, they're not clear, and this drives a math teacher insane because you need to have everything laid out perfectly so that we can do the best job possible and the most efficient way possible. I attended the New York State Math Conference last Friday. New York State Ed was there. Their response to everything was find the gaps in 3 through 8 and fill them. And they said that at least 5 times. Find the gaps, and it's our responsibility at the high school to find the gaps and fill them. Like, we can snap our fingers and do that. The implementation is wrong. The students are expected to know things in the high school that were taught at the elementary, but were never taught to them because they're starting it, instead of starting it in kindergarten, they're starting it immediately. And again, it is our job to fill the gaps. The mandates are, as you know, has hit Clarence quite hard. Clarence has been punished for being a lean school district that was run very fiscally responsible, and because of the tax cap, we have been just devastated by what New York State has required of us. Haste makes waste. We are definitely building the plane while it is in flight. Like I said, over the past 31 years that I've been teaching, when I first started, it was Math 9, 10, 11. Then it switched to course 1, 2, 3. Then it switched to Math AB. Now we're back to Algebra, Geometry, and Trig, and now we're moving into Common Core. Algebra, Geometry, and Trig was not a great program either. In case you didn't know, to pass the integrated algebra exam, students needed 33 to 34% to pass. The Algebra 2 Trig course that I'm currently teaching is about a 200-day course, and I have about 175 days to teach it in. So again, my students need to know that I can get them successfully through this course and feel good about what they're doing and feel that they are a success in what they do. And we are the suburban district. I can't even imagine what the city of Buffalo, New York City, Syracuse, Albany, Binghamton are going through. with all these mandates. Again, thank you for your time, and I also wanted to address the morale. I love my job. My colleagues love their jobs. We are doing our best to stay positive, but it becomes more and more difficult every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. Carrie Wickenberg, Thanks, Carrie.
Hello. I am not a public speaker. I'm just a mom, so this is like lots of fear. But I have a lot of love for my son, so I really just want to get everything out. This year, when I went to his classroom for his orientation, I was told he would be learning Eastern ancient civilization, Greek mythology, War of 1812. My son is in 2nd grade. I learned all that when I was in 10th grade. I can remember it specifically. I also have math homework. I started saving it all up and I threw it away because I didn't think there was anywhere to take it. But I still have one. And I use your really good listening ears here. It says, solve the facts by recording, make 10 solutions with number bonds. I don't even know what that means. It's not a coherent sentence. Even if it was a coherent sentence, there's no directions there. These are Common Core Engage New York papers. And this is what I get home constantly. And I was fighting it and fighting it. I thought it was the school system. I didn't know any better. I'm a parent that works. I'm ill. I'm going to school again. And I'm sitting here 2-3 hours a night with a 2nd grader who can't come home and play or do anything anymore. Because he's doing homework. And this is a kid who is consistently tested far above standards of any other kids in his grade. And I'm not saying he's the greatest kid in the world, but he has, since he was little, been tested because of speech problems. And he's always been years beyond the other children. And he's still spending 2-3 hours a night in 2nd grade. He's telling me about the Ganges River, he's telling me about the Yangtze River, he's telling me about everything else. He can't tell me where New York is on a map. Why are we learning that over our own West? That doesn't seem fair. None of it seems fair, and I don't want to see my son start to fail. He went from last year getting A's across the board to now he's getting 70s, 44s. I brought everything with me. He's failing now, and he tells me constantly he's not smart. He is smart, and I tell him that over and over again, but he thinks because of this that he's not. And that's all I gotta say.
Carrie, you're a great public speaker. You're speaking from the heart. And thank you. I appreciate you coming up and telling us all about that. Thank you. Rebecca Smith.
Hi there. I don't have an eloquent speech prepared either. I didn't even know there was the opportunity to speak when I walked in the door. I just kind of signed the card. I am not a teacher. I am not an educator of any kind. I am actually a banker. I have a very I'm a very math-minded person. I stood on the stage. I'm a native Akronite and graduated on the stage as salutatorian of my class, graduating with high honors math, and I cannot help my daughter do her 5th grade homework. I have a 1st grader and a 5th grader. Last night, my 1st grader came home and we were doing math problems that were subtracting from the numbers 7 and 6. And I said, Jake, we have the number 6. What can we do to make a new equation? Okay, we take off 1. We got 5. Okay, we got an equation. I'm a rock star at 1st grade math, okay? My 5th grader, she comes home with no textbook, no lesson. She comes home with a lesson that has actually just problems all over it and doesn't have any explanation. As a parent, I'm not provided with any tools, any kind of skills, any kind of breakdown of how to break that down to her and try to explain it to her. You know, Googling your life away to try to find the answers to this is just gonna get you more frustrated. She doesn't necessarily struggle in school, but she's not a terrific student. I mean, she has to work for what she gets. She's getting extremely frustrated with her workload. And I am a mom who wants my child to be a very well-rounded student, including sports, music, art, all of those things. And she does participate in those things, but sometimes she just feels extremely overwhelmed as a 10-year-old. And when she falters, where do I go when she's so frustrated? What groups are out there for me? What resources are available to me? I want a textbook. I want to be able to look at something and to see what it is she's learning and how to break it down for her. She might get the right answer, but then gets marked off for how she got there. In my book, if she's got the right answer, she's got the right answer. I don't care how she got there. If her mind thinks a little differently than someone else's, that's okay. I'm not necessarily against state testing, testing of any kind. You certainly do need an assessment to know how your students are performing, but yet you shouldn't necessarily just be teaching just for the test. Anxiety, I'll mirror some of the other comments that were made. Anxiety, I've been on the fence about getting my daughter assessed for anxiety, and I think she's there. I have a niece who currently, just last week, had to start Concerta because she cannot deal with, as an 8th grader, being that well-rounded student, participating in sports, participating in music programs, and trying to maintain her 95 average. She's a fantastic student, but for her to get there, it's draining everything she has. Like I said, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a mom, and that's just, I feel very inadequate to be able to try to help my child get through school. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The next card I have is, there's no first name on it, it's M. Neifer?
I'm a little nervous. I'm a former teacher, elementary and special ed. I am a high school student and a 3rd grader. This Common Core, I was helping my son do his spelling homework in a workbook. I mean, they're using workbooks for spelling. And I was reading his questions, and I couldn't even understand them. I had to read it 3 or 4 times before I could explain it to him, what he needed to do. And now that he has this, and I've got that junior in high school, and she's getting hit with this Common Core, she's almost done. How is he going to help her? She's been failing since 4th grade, yet she's been shoved through the system. And like I said, my son with this testing, I'm anxious about it. Because what does this do? It takes a lot of time, and looking at it from the teacher's perspective, who wants to teach to the test? It takes out the creativity out of the classroom where you can take the subject material that you have, like you've got to teach about the Middle East. I taught 9th grade special ed at one point, and I had to teach about the Middle East. And I brought in my own experiences of living over in Turkey and made it come alive for these kids. Teachers can't do that. They won't be able to do that if they have to teach to this test, and this test takes a big chunk of time out of the school year. It just, I can't say it enough. I'm behind the teachers, and as a parent, I can see where they're coming from. I'm actually glad now that I got out of the profession when I did, because I wouldn't be able to take it now. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you staying and giving us your comments as well. I don't want you to, it's amazing when you hear people tell their stories, and I certainly, I think we can all sense the real sense of frustration that's going on out there. So really, I appreciate it. You're coming up and taking the time to do it. Darren Polkowski?
I have, my wife and I, we have four children, 5th grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten, and 2 years to 1.5 years until he's in school. I've watched my daughter go from, actually all of our kids do pretty well, English and math, science, they have great minds. I'm looking at my older 2 starting to hate school. Going from outstanding and just loving life to, do I have to go? it's a sad thing to watch my kids, just a perception of something that should be fun and entertaining, and at the same time being engaging and expanding their minds to being a drudgery and a job. My children don't need that. I didn't have that as a child. I'm watching my daughter in 5th grade do concepts that I did a year prior. Thanks to teachers like Mrs. Stasiak, who I had in 9th grade at Clarence, and teachers like Mrs. Wallshauser, who I had for 2 years. I passed econometrics, which is statistics-based, or calculus-based statistics for economics for my undergrad and my MBA. So there are wonderful teachers that are out there, and they make the course load engaging and wonderful. I look at my son, he has 1 day to have recess. There's something wrong with that in 3rd grade. It's asinine to me to think about my kids who do well in school, to think about these kids that have disabilities, to even think what they're being told to do that my own kids that could handle it aren't being asked to do. So there's obviously an upside down perspective on how we're looking at metrics are good, a high standard is good. We have systems. We're New York State. We were the pinnacle, in my opinion, when I moved here in 1986, of how well education should be. I remember my brother getting, it wasn't much, but he got a $50 savings bond for passing the Regents exams. I mean, that was what we strove to do, is excel our kids, to push them forward, to get them into college, to get them to better grades, to better things. And I'm watching all these people leave the state because we're no different anymore. What's the point? So, I mean, I plead with you, make education what education should be. A place to have our children expand their minds, to expand their experiences, but do it in a fashion that makes sense to them, in a way that makes sense to them. What I'm seeing my kids go through right now, it just crushes my heart to think, here's my daughter loves to read, she loves science, she loves these things, and I ask her every so often, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I keep watching the things, her decision disappear from the things she wanted to do, because she doesn't think she could be that new. I don't know. It's sad to just have a conversation with her, and she doesn't like it. So I plead with you, do something to make those in the ivory tower that think they know better for my kid to come to my house and have dinner with my kids and understand the things.
Thank you very much. Michael Bennett?
First, I'd like to thank you for holding this forum. My name is Michael Bennett. I'm a member of the Alden School Board, and I'm the father of 3 school-age girls from 2nd grade up to 9th grade. So talk about stress in the house at test taking time. I mean, it gets crazy. But this is my personal opinion right now, is I believe we'll find out that this was one of the biggest mistakes in education that we're making right now. But New York State got $700 million to participate in the race to the top. The state kept $350 million to create a database, leaving $350 million to be passed out to 700 school districts. But small school districts like the one I represent, Alden, we got approximately $50,000 to implement this program, and yet it's costing our district hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it, to implement it. And now there's a tax cap on the school district. The state aid is still below what the schools were receiving 4 to 5 years ago. In Alden, our budget is $5 million less than what it was 5 years ago. I mean, when schools are making the cuts, they're trying to do the right thing, trying to live within our limits, you know. And but now we have to make a choice to cut programs and teachers in order to implement these new Common Core standards. And I guess what it gets me is essentially state ed wants us to raise the standards, but we have to cut programs and teachers in order to do it. How does that math add up? It doesn't add up to me. And I mean, I could go on like a lot of the parents here. Everything that everybody said, I second that. But there's one thing, this is me personally speaking also. I served in the Army. I'm a veteran from Persian Gulf, and I served under General Schwarzkopf. There's a leader that you would trust your life with. You'd run through a brick wall if that man ever asked you to. And even though he's past 42 years old, I'd still do it. But we got a commissioner of education who doesn't even send his kids to a public school, who's never done anything inside of a public school. How are these teachers, these administrators, to look up to this guy as a leader? He's not a leader. All he is a mouthpiece for the governor. And he just, whatever the governor tells him to say, this is puppet. And I sit back, I'm just an average Joe, I'm middle class dad, and I sit there and I see this guy and I think, this is the best we have to offer. This is the top of the education that we have. It's a little disheartening, but I do want to thank you again for having this forum tonight. It means a lot that you guys come out and listen to us in the public. Thank you.
Thank you for your service and both on the school board and Persian Gulf. Wendy Delaney.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank all the parents that are here because I feel a lot less alone than I did last year at this time, because I started doing a lot of my own research, and 3,200 minutes is the basic minimum amount of time that was given in testing for a 7 or 8-year-old. That's 53.3 hours of testing, which was taken away from my child's education to learn something beneficial to make him a well-rounded individual and a good standing member of the community. Testing that is grading his teacher, grading their peers, and things that don't really matter in life. And I think that the education process needs to be put back into the hands of the teacher, the educator. This company is not making any one of us any better, our children any better. It's taking a lot of money. It's taking my hard-earned money, because I'm going to be honest, I'm in healthcare. I've got the other spectrum. I'm looking at healthcare reform. I've got 24 years under my belt, and we could sit here and talk about that. The education that's going on right now and the healthcare that's going on right now are like one and the same. It's sad. I'm just going to tell you really quick, I know we're pressed for time and people would really like to get home. When the testing came up last year, I have 2 children, and I started asking a lot of questions. My kids were coming home, I'm being tested in gym, I'm being tested in art, and I'm being tested, I have to do bubbles and this and that. I thought, you're crazy. So I started asking some pretty hard questions, and I said, yeah, we have to take SLOs and APPRs, and then I thought this was a little peculiar. So I started asking questions, the teachers started informing me, and then I started going outside and doing my own research. And I went to the principal and the teacher, and I said, why are we doing this? The state says we have to do it. I said, okay, I can respect that. I said, well, why? Well, because we've got to get these scores in. We've got to get these ELAs and these math scores, and if we don't get it, we're going to lose funding, and then we're going to lose this program and that program. What if my child doesn't take the test? You can't do that. Well, why can't I? You can't do that. If you do that, your child can't come to school for 12 days. Really? I thought it was my civil right for my child to go to school. So I didn't argue. I did not want to be adversarial. My sister works for a law firm. I contacted an attorney, and I served the district with papers. Not to be nasty, not to be a terrible person, but to make a point. 27 hours of labor, that's my child, it's my rules, and I will decide if he takes a test or if he doesn't take a test. I'm gonna be honest, when I started looking into refusals and if this was a good thing or a bad thing, it was probably the hardest decision of my life because I did not, under any circumstances, want to teach my child, hey, the going gets rough, you don't have to do it. It was hard, and any parent that is sitting here and is listening or knows a parent that's chosen to take their child out of that environment, it's hard. It's not an easy decision because you are singling out your child. When I did that, I started getting hate mail. Started getting mail, anonymous mail, that I was hurting the district by taking their state, their state funding away, their Title I funding away from their schools because I chose to do what's best for my child. I had him in academic interventional services because his math was poor and his scores went down. He started to fail. I started to ask questions. They told me, I'm really, really sorry, Mrs. Delanady, but we have to do this. The state tells us we have to give him 3 or 4 different ways to answer a problem in one day before he's even mastered the concept as 8 years old. So I pulled him out. I want him out. Well, you can't do that. Oh, yes, I can. I now have nasty letters from the district that say that I have to sign this so I can put it as permanent file because I refused my child help. I also refused services until the teacher deemed fit that he needed it. My child's on the honor roll now, less than 1 year later. What's wrong with the system? I stand here before you, I could go on, I've got such testimony that could probably make you sick to your stomach. I'm also to the point when I call the schools about finding a way to keep my child's personal health information away from them. They told me I can't do that. I said, show me the law that says that I have to give it to you. Show me the law that says that you need my child's weight to give him a quality education. I got no reply. So I pulled it. I pulled everything. I asked them what they share. I sat down with the director of elementary education and I said, what did I sign that gave you the permission to share this information? Oh, well, you don't have to sign anything. We're just allowed to do it. Okay. So when you come into the hospital and I'm taking care of you, can I go share your personal information? Oh, well, you can't do that. There's a double standard here. And basically, if you think about healthcare, you take your kids, you take one of your family members into the doctor's office and you say, what's going on with my child? And they tell you. They expect us to have our children go to school, take these tests, and we say, what's going on with my children? They don't know. Because they're not allowed to know. That's a crime. So I'm asking you, I'm begging you, I think everybody's begging you, especially when it comes to the childhood safety of their information, please develop a plan that allows the parents to sign off saying no. If other people want us to share their information, that's their business. But please give the parents that feel so strongly against it an option to say no. My child.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate some great suggestions there too. Wendy brought up a good point too. If there's anyone who wanted to speak tonight and they just chose not to, but would like to send in some comments, please feel free to send them to our offices. You can send them, I mean, if you Google us, you'll find any of us pretty easily, but janecorwin.com is my website that you can leave contact information or even just leave a comment. So please feel free, if you know someone who wasn't here tonight who'd like to send some comments, and we're always looking for input. We've got 3 more speakers left here. We have Lisa Haney. Great, thanks, Lisa.
Hi, I'm also a mom. 2 kids, 9th grade. Last year, I would never have thought the idea of saying the option of opting out was a luxury. But it is, because right now, for my kids, they're both in 9th grade, they don't get to opt out. From what I've been reading, and I'm new to this, it's only been about a month that I've been researching and reading up, math curriculum is completely changed. I have 2 children, both of them in 9th grade. one is high honor roll, the other one is a high merit roll. She has dyslexia, among a few other learning disabilities, and that kid works harder than I know, twice as much time as her brother. If I was looking at just the sheets, you're gonna think, who would you pick for college, jobs? You'd go to the high grades, but I'm telling you, you're gonna want the workhorse. This kid who doesn't complain, who will come home, grab dinner, and sit at the table and do her homework until 8 o'clock at night. And that doesn't mean studying for tests that are coming up. It means just the basic homework. She gets it done. We go into school, I don't even know what time school starts because they show up at quarter to 8 in the morning because every one of their teachers from Clarence are in school early to help these kids. I don't even know, you can help me. Piece-wise, I have no idea what that was, but it was something new that was added with Common Core for 9th grade math that their teacher told them 2 years ago he was teaching it to seniors. They're both going in and asking for extra help. A number of things were never thought of when they thought about this. One of the things, last year, at the end of the year, my daughter was in her IEP meeting, and she won't speak up. She is a child who's been taught to respect her elders, fall under the authority, which are her teachers in her classroom, and she will not speak against them. But they want these kids to speak up and be a part of it. She's in an IEP meeting with 8 adults and myself. They wanted her to say something. One of her biggest complaints, not complaints, but concerns, was that math last year was so hard because it would take her teacher, now she was in a co-teaching, so there was a second special ed teacher in her classroom, and then they would have one period of resource where they could review this. That math teacher would take 3, 4, 5 attempts to figure out the problem. Why? Because that information just got to them maybe a week ahead of time. And this is not a criticism of the teachers because I can't do 3rd grade math.
One of the biggest problems is my children, all right, when they had a problem with a concept, or say a math concept, what would happen is either I would sit down and try to help them with it, okay? Or if I couldn't, I would pay for a tutor to keep them up to speed. Now, a lot of times in the inner schools, when you have economic hardships going on, and I have single-parent households, and they're fighting just to keep the lights on, or the roof over their head, or food on the table, and their priorities, as much as they want their kids, their priorities be education, these are other things that are more important. And how are you finding that in the city schools? The gap now has got to be getting
It's enormous. It's enormous. Particularly the population that I work with, they're mostly refugees. So the whole concept of the American education system is very foreign. They're mostly on public assistance or one parent is working, and they do not have the skills to help their children with the work in English. If they're lucky, they were educated in their home country and they're able to provide assistance with some of the more universal concepts in math. But the teachers are trying to pick up the slack. We offer after-school programs with free assistance, homework assistance with certified teachers who are trying to help them. And as an ESL teacher, I go to the homes and I help them as much as I can, but the gap is tremendous. And
they're falling farther and farther.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have Michelle Hall.
Hi. First, thank you not only for hosting this, but also for staying way past this time. This is, absolutely wonderful that you're doing this, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for waiting too.
Not a problem. I didn't even know that you were able to speak tonight, so it's kind of off the cuff. And quite honestly, most of the things that I wanted to say to you, everybody has so eloquently, and even better than I could even have expressed, they have already expressed that. So I really wanted to say that, ditto on everything that was said. And then just a few other things I wanted to point out that may not have been addressed. First of all, I have 3 children, 2 who are in college that are engineering majors. One has a $27,000 scholarship to Syracuse University. Both products of Frontier High School, public school education, who've gone through well before Common Core, and they got a phenomenal education. I also have a kindergartner who I am not sending to public school. I'm also a public school teacher. This breaks my heart beyond anything that I can think of, because we live in the Frontier District and it's a phenomenal school, and it's killing me that I'm not sending him there. The Common Core is destructive. Oh, in addition, so I teach public school, but I teach I'm a high school English teacher at Maryvale. And what I wanted to say that hasn't really been mentioned is the text pieces in the Common Core. I don't know if you've looked at them or if anybody really has had a chance to look at what these text pieces are, but they're horrendous. They're not only inappropriate for the grade level, which they want to talk about the rigor and the vocab and things like that, which I can understand. However, they're not understanding that the concepts behind the pieces that are being designed are highly inappropriate. For example, well, the irony being 1984 being taught in 9th grade, a 9th grader has no ability to understand the concepts of why George Orwell wrote what he wrote, which is ironic based on the fact of what he wrote, about what he wrote. So I think maybe it was well placed. Who knows? They say they can read it and not really understand it. But then there's other pieces that I would be embarrassed to teach. We do a lot of, looking at the text pieces in class, doing close reads and things like that. And I'm reading a book now that's going to be in the Common Core and the modules. And on average, there's about 5 swear words per page on this book. Other words that I can't even say, not in front of you, not in front of these kids, whatever. And I'm thinking, how would I even be able to teach that in front of these children? And even though I'm in 10th grade, I still consider them my kids. I tell students, but they're still, they shouldn't be hearing these swear words. They shouldn't be hearing these inappropriate conversations, these inappropriate interactions, because it makes them think it's okay. And if they want to read that for their independent reading, I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is me standing in front of them, teaching them that this is a valuable piece of literature, and it's okay to act this way, it's okay to have this view when it's highly inappropriate. There are some other texts in the modules that have explicit, I'm just going to say R-rated scenes in them that, again, would be totally embarrassed to teach, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. So that's one thing I want to say. The modules have not been designed and thought through in an efficient manner. I don't think people, and I don't mean to say this as an insulting form, but I don't think people who have experience in education wrote these things. They're highly inappropriate. The things that they're requiring at the speed that they're requiring is silly. It's just, there's no other word for it. We're taking away the love of education from the students and for the teachers. There was a teacher, I believe, from Clarence who said she loves her job and her teachers love her job. Same thing with me. I love it. And I miss teaching. I miss teaching every day. I miss it to the heart of everything. It's not about teaching anymore. It's about, doing what we have to be told. It's about reading from a script. And I don't understand that. There's no creativity. There's nothing in there for the teachers and the students. We're more than just a number. The students are, the teachers are. And I think the testing is, we need to test the kids in high school. We tested the 11th grade year for English. I have no problem with testing. It's the over-testing that we have a problem with, and it's the idea that the tests are not reliable and they're not valid. And somebody needs to start looking at that, because that's where the problem really lies. Everything else really has been addressed, and I don't want to keep you anymore, so I think I will leave it there. But I do thank you again, and please, I know that there's a lot that has to be done in order to get this to be changed, and whatever you can do, I appreciate your efforts. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, again, I want to apologize for going so long as far as not managing time, but you know what? There were so many important points that were brought up, and I didn't want to cut anybody short, because I think they were all very, very important things to be said. I know for myself personally, this really helps me to understand how the people in my district feel about Common Core, about the direction education's going in right now, and I can't tell you how invaluable that is for me to know that for when I go back to Albany in January. What we will be doing is taking these comments. Ed and Al have been going around the state collecting them in other areas. We'll be putting this stuff together, and come January, we convene as a conference, and we will be able to swap information and discuss more thoroughly in terms of a statewide level, in terms of what kind of an initiative we want to take going forward to address some of these issues. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a federal standard. You know, the states are limited in terms of what they can do in terms of curriculum. When it comes to funding, we have a lot more influence because of the budgeting process in Albany. But absolutely everything that's been said tonight will be sent forward, and you will have, at least for me, advocacy for you on my behalf. So thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues for coming, especially Ed and Al for coming all the way from Long Island. I'm going to pass the microphone down so everyone can make a closing remark. But again, thank you very, very much for taking the time, for being here. For those of you who are teaching, for getting up there every day and dealing with this and working so hard every day. I know my son's at Clarence High School, and I know I see what the teachers go through every day, and it's just so heartwarming to see such wonderful people in the profession. And for those parents, I feel your pain. I've got a student too, so we will definitely be working on this issue. So I'll pass this along to Ed.
Thank you, Jane. I just want to quickly, because as I said earlier, we've been doing these in a number of different places, and we've heard a lot of very similar testimony, and there's a recurring thing that we heard tonight, and I've heard a number of times from mothers, many of whom are teachers who come up here, and I think a lot of times sell themselves a little short when they say, I'm just a mother, or I'm not prepared to speak, or I don't think, I'm going to do my best, but I'm not a good public speaker. Those have been the best pieces of testimony we have heard, bar none. And Al, I know, can touch on this with some of the things he's been doing with his bill, but the reason this conversation, I think, is starting to turn is because of the mothers, is because of the fathers, is because of the grandmothers and grandparents we've heard from as well. Because you're not just coming at it from the perspective of a mother, but the mother's perspective or the father's perspective is of the most important thing in their life, something that they would give anything they have to protect and make sure that child has success in their education. So that is so valuable. Just keep making your voices heard. I'm so happy to have heard from so many of you, and we're going to keep taking what you've brought to us forward as we advocate for changes so that we can improve the classroom experience of all of our teachers and all of our students, and so that once again we can get to the day when that child comes home to do his homework, that can be a cherished time that you're sitting with your child doing their homework, rather than being just an incredibly frustrating time for both the student and the parent. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight.
And I just want to say, you thanked us for coming here. I want to thank you for coming. And understand that what I had said, you're not only mothers, you're educators. You're out there educating your neighbors. You're educating your friends. You're on the internet. You're using your Facebook pages. You're using everything to bring this to light. You're the ones that are changing the conversation in the state. And you have the governor and Commissioner King are starting to learn something that I learned a long time ago in my household, that my kids are always telling me, that if mommy's not happy, nobody's happy. Okay? So keep up what you're doing. You give us strength to come out here and do what we have to do. You give us the strength to go into the halls of Albany and fight these battles. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that took time out to come here tonight and tell us your stories and tell us how this is affecting you in your homes, in your classrooms, and in your schools. Thank you very much.
For those of you that are interested in understanding what Mr. Graff had to say, there are written comments up here. Sometimes it's hard for us Western New Yorkers to understand. It's great to be here tonight. It's great to see all of you and to hear your comments. Oftentimes we hear that Albany knows best, and we heard some testimony from someone tonight that the commissioner and the other individual that helped to come up with this uncommon core have a combined teaching of 5 years and 3 years of other experience. That's what each of us has to put up with every single day that we're in Albany. It's not easy. There's not a lot of common sense. There's not a lot of asking you, who live in our school districts, who live in our communities, what do you think about it? Talking to experts, talking about people who have experience isn't common in Albany, and we're trying to change that, and so are you. Don't give up the ship. It's not over until it's over, and we're going to keep working on it for all of you and the children.
Thank you. As a father of a 7th grader and a kindergartner in Williamsville Central Schools, I'm living it not just through the words that I heard from you tonight, but the words that I hear at home every single night. So thank you very much for being here and participating and changing the course of education in New York State. Thank you.
As a father of a 1st grader and looking at those Common Core tests that she brings home in 1st grade when she should be playing and she has homework every night, it's pretty frustrating. As father to a stepson who has dyslexia and has a learning disability and watching him struggle, it's frustrating. I understand what you're going through. I hope we can effectuate change. I think you have a lot of support here on our conference. Appreciate you coming out tonight. It does mean a lot. It does mean a lot to hear these kind of comments. It does resonate. I don't want you to go home thinking that it doesn't. You took your time out. You made a very, very passionate plea. I enjoyed it. It touched my heart. It gives me more energy to go to Albany and do the right thing, and I thank you.
As my colleagues have said, we get more out of this than you guys do, so thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you again, everybody. Please be careful driving home tonight, and absolutely, let's keep in touch. Keep the conversation going. Thank you.